Right. Good morning. It is 9:30, so I'm going to call this meeting of General Government and Public Safety Committee to order. We have an agenda. It's a two-item agenda. Any changes?
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, hearing no opposition, we have an agenda. First up on the agenda is the Regional Athletic Complex operations and uses. And it looks like Jamie Oakland is going to be making that presentation, or is it you, Julie?
Actually, I'm going to be.
Okay, great.
It's just Lenny's.
This doesn't have a volume control on it.
Yeah, Lenny's volume is low.
My volume is low.
Yeah, your volume's low.
Oh,
Let me. It's really up high, so I don't know why.
yeah.
Is that
I can hear
better?
him perfectly. I can hear him perfectly fine on my end. So I can hear him, no problem.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Is that better?
I don't want to delay the meeting over this.
Well, Julie, it's all you. Go ahead.
Well, good morning. Today, I'd like to share with you the array of events that take place here at the Regional Athletic Complex, Lacey's Place to Play. So when you think of the RAC, which I'm going to call it the shortened version from here on out, you naturally think of Quidditch, right? Or it could be Battle of the Beast, and both of these events did take place at our park. All kidding aside, when most of us think of the RAC, we think of the usuals: baseball, fast pitch, adult softball league, soccer, and the ever-growing sports of lacrosse, ultimate frisbee, and flag football. Flag football actually has our park rented out on Memorial Day weekend. This sport in particular is becoming huge. There's going to be, I think, 60 plus teams with a massive amount of spectators because they have semi-pro athletes that will compete in it.
Wow.
Next slide. We also host the Lake Fair Volleyball Tournament. In the fall, we have an event called the RV Rodeo, where motor coach drivers will take those huge tour buses and they have to run them through an obstacle course, backing around tight corners. They are earning points, and it's a qualifying event for the national tournament. And then we have a lot of morning PT out here at the park. The military comes here because when they're here to do PT, they don't have to wear their official clothing. So they love our park for that reason. They also have appreciation days. On June 23rd, the I-94 artillery unit is renting our facilities here during the day. From 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., they're going to rent 3 soccer fields, 3 softball fields, all the basketball courts. So they will be here from 7 to 5, like I said. And then that evening, we have softball use and soccer use. And then that very next day, we have the Polynesian Festival kickoff that will be here through the weekend. So it'll be a busy week for us. We also have a bearded collie dog show. They'll rent usually soccer field 3. They set up an agility course, you can see here on the right, that the dogs will run through. And then we have fun runs, whether they are fundraising for cancer or autism, or it could be the local high schools hosting a cross-country meet. We even had Under Armour rent our synthetic soccer field to produce a commercial in August of 2020. It was a pretty big event. They had movie style lighting that had to be placed around the soccer field. So we had to plan with them how they were going to get that lighting to the various locations without wrecking our irrigation or our turf. It was pretty much called Stay on the Asphalt Pathways. And then they also had to rent a massive crane to hold the snowmaking machine because they were making this a wintertime commercial. So it ended up taking from 6 p.m. at night till 6 a.m. the following morning to produce a 15-second long commercial. Crazy.
Yeah.
And then in February and March of 2020, we partnered with Thurston County Health Department. We hosted a mass vaccination site for COVID. This took quite a bit of planning, actually. It took over a month of planning with various agencies, getting the flow of traffic down, you know, where the people, how the people would go through that day. And then at the same time, we still had soccer use and we still had softball use. So as people came into the park, we had to direct them, you know, to the areas they were going. And it was a long day. The volunteers for this event showed up at about 5:30 in the morning, and we finally were tearing down at 4:30. But all in all, 1,100 local residents got their COVID shots here. So it was a great event. And then we just have our day users, you know, whether it's the parents trying to wear their kids out on one of our 3 playgrounds, or somebody wanting to walk their dog, or, you know, get their daily jog in. So really, the RAC is more than just athletics. It's really where everybody comes. So what does this mean for maintenance? So there are 3 areas where our usage affects us. Customer service, right? Because each user group has different needs. Then we have to schedule the maintenance. We have to schedule either what the user needs or what the park itself needs around that user group schedule. And then we need staffing to ensure that we have people here to not only, you know, provide the customer service, but then also to get things ready for the various events. So this is a chart of the 2021 RAC labor costs or hours. You can see 64% is directly related to our user groups. That includes daily rounds, event, park and rec support, artificial turf, sport fields, and then administrative. The hiring and training of seasonals who play a critical role in our operations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. So scheduling maintenance, like I said earlier, you know, we have events all the time. There's 362 days of the year that we have something scheduled in our softball complex. So all of that use comes wear and tear. Pictured here on the left is we are creating a patch for a batter's box. So think of all of the people ever standing in a batter's box. Those areas get worn down. So this isn't a quick fix, right? It takes us 2 to 4 hours to cut that patch out. In that far left picture, he's actually using sheep shears. We have to cut the rust-colored turf out and create an area for the white line to be glued in to create the box itself. And then on the far right, you'll see the finished product. What you don't see is on the other side is Velcro. So now we Velcro the back side of the patch, and then we put Velcro in the field so that it's a quicker process. So on the far left here, you can see that black material around the edges. That's a Velcro. Then we place the patch in, we infill it with rubber and sand per the manufacturer's specifications, and then the completed product. So down the road, if once it gets worn out, we can just literally rip out a new patch, put a new one in. Also remember though, that once this process is started, it has to get done that day, because we have always somebody coming in to use that facility. So once you cut that hole, there's no going back. So you got to get it done. Otherwise, you're not going to have happy campers out here. And then the natural turf fields, you know, they take wear and tear as well. On the left here, you can see the goal area of a lacrosse field. So it's each row times 1,000, right? I don't know what these lacrosse goalies do, but they make a mess out of a field, especially in the raining season, which lacrosse is played in the spring. And this spring we've had a lot of rain. And so the turf just gets eaten up. So we'll either cut that area out and replace it with fresh sod, or if we don't have time, then we'll just fill it with sand. And then on the right there, you can see our soccer field. So we have soccer fields used from March until the end of October. So we found that if we rest each natural turf soccer field 1 per month, then it really does provide an excellent playing surface over that course of that entire season. So we'll close down the soccer field for 3 weeks. We'll top dress it with sand. We'll aerate it, and then we cut out these goal areas that get so worn down, bring in new sod. And the reason why it's 3 weeks is it's about that long, how long it takes for the sod to root in. And then it's ready to go for the rest of the season. And then we have sport field lining. So on our soccer fields, when we have tournaments, they're not always soccer tournaments, right? Pictured here is a lacrosse tournament. So usually on the larger lacrosse tournaments, they will rent all 6 of our soccer fields. So each of those fields have to have the lacrosse field laid out, got to be strong, and then painted. And this process generally takes us 2 days to complete. And that's while we're also taking care of the daily needs of the park, whether it's user groups, maintenance, but then also preparing for what's coming up on that weekend. And here's a little snippet of our calendar. So on the right here is our April calendar. So on the 11th, you see Lacey, and on the 15th, you see Lacey. That's our city-sponsored adult softball league. Notice on the 11th, you'll see Timberline underneath Lacey. So what that is that's a fast pitch game that happens before Lacey City League. So we'll have to set up the temporary fences, which is pictured over here in the blue, for that fast pitch game. And then once that game is complete, that fence has to come down for the adult softball league happening that night. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have Cal Ripken, where not only do they need those fences, but then they also need these large mounds, which is placed on the field using a tractor because they weigh 600 pounds. So sometimes we'll have a fast pitch game, but then it's followed by a Cal Ripken game. And so that time period between 5:30 and 6 is pretty hectic. Not only do we have to get that mound out in the field when you've got a lot of excited baseball players, right? But I also need to make sure I have a member of our staff that's qualified to operate that tractor to get that done for our use that night. And staffing. So we have four full-time regular employees and 5 temporary 6-month seasonal employees, along with 5 part-time employees. We have use scheduled 52 weekends in a year. We have evenings here. We call them evenings, but typically it runs from 2:30 in the afternoon till 11 o'clock at night. But if a tournament runs late, it's gone as late as 2 a.m. in the morning. And so within our proverbial 40-hour work week, we actually schedule labor for 113 and a half hours a week. And then this brings me back to the other point. 42% of labor provided here is by our part-time employees. Without them, there would be no way to support what we have as far as user group needs. So earlier I said they were critical, and they truly are. So I often think of the RAC as conducting a symphony, right? You've got your horn players, that could be the staffing, and you've got flutes, and that could be the user group schedule. You know, if you're missing any of these key components, then your symphony is off key. But if you have all the instruments present, then, you know, it brings together a harmonious symphony for everyone to enjoy, whether they're watching the show or participating in in it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Julie. That was an awesome presentation. So obviously the park is heavily used.
Yeah.
Any questions from anyone else?
I have a question. So yeah, the very important work that your staff is doing to keep up on that park. How would you describe the morale of the crew? Is there opportunities for them to advance, or if the part-timers want to work full-time, is there opportunities for them so keep a healthy, happy work crew engaged?
Yeah, so we actually have been very fortunate out here. We are very much so like a family, and we do have opportunities for people to advance, and they see those examples throughout our city. We've had 2 different maintenance assistants, which is more of an entry type of level position. Get journey level positions. We have a temporary maintenance A3 who is a seasonal position, but's allowed to run the equipment so that they can get that equipment experience. And quite a few times that position's turned into the full-time of maintenance assistants. So, and then the other thing that's unique about out here is we really have such a big range of hours we have to cover. You know, I see the Amazon commercial, right? Lately, they're like, oh, you can only work 2 days, or you have to have evenings. You know, we can do that. Well, we can do that too here. So I'm almost like, hey, knock it off, Amazon. Stop trying to take the employees we hire out here. But we have a lot of flexibility. And so we're able to meet not only what we need here at the park, but more importantly, the needs of the individual person. So.
Great.
Awesome. Andy, go ahead.
So, Scott, I think I sent you an email a little while back from a soccer team or soccer league who has been, I think, out in Tumwater. They're a nonprofit, but they saw their rates increase like 300%. And so, you know, for the season, it was going to cost them something like $14,000 for them to practice and do their thing. That becomes, you know, pretty expensive. And they looked even at, you know, at the rack and see what their rates would be as a nonprofit. And it was still really quite expensive. And so how do we figure out what is the right charge for our field? Because if we charge too much, then it makes it very hard for local leagues to use them. But obviously we need to charge enough to try to keep up with some of the maintenance and costs. And so how do we figure out what the rates are for our
Usually
users?
it's based on the market. So they do surveys and find out what comparable facilities like the rack actually charge. And then we also look at the per field cost. It's not necessarily driven by, you know, trying to have enough revenue to cover all the costs, because we already know we have to subsidize the rack. Once they do that evaluation, the Parks Board actually takes a look at that, and then they affirm those rates for the market. So we're constantly adjusting based on what, in a sense, all the users groups do within the Puget Sound area.
Well, it seems like we're starting to, I mean, $14,000 for a small team trying to, you know, to do that seems like it's getting quite expensive. So I'm not sure what the right number should be, but it seemed obviously, like that when I sent that to you, they said their rates went up 300%. And so I'm not sure what the answer is, but it feels like, you know, if we're pricing people out, especially our local teams, doesn't feel too good.
I do know that we do, our sister park is Rainier Vista, and there are fields there as well to use, but I do know overall there is such a demand of fields that, you know, even schools are being used. So
yeah, well, there's no doubt we need more fields, that's for sure.
And I think it's important just to point out, and Scott's kind of just started to mention this, but you know, we get this question from the public fairly often about the rack in particular paying for itself. think people need to remember that it is also a park.
Yeah.
So it is, it needs to be funded with general fund dollars in addition to the fees that it brings in. And it's completely appropriate for us to do that because it is a community park that our residents use. I mean, I know I take my grandkids to that park on a regular basis. We're there, quite often. So I just think it's important for the public to understand that part too.
Yeah, I agree. We don't expect the public to pay for Wonderwood Park or any of the other major parks, and yet we do there at the RAC.
And it's not possible. I mean, it is a community asset, and as such, it is a responsibility for the city as a whole, for the entire city to pay for it.
Yep.
So, anyway, Julie, thank you very much. That was
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Really appreciate
Thank you.
the presentation. All right, and next on our agenda is the BIPOC Business Training Program update, and I think that Rick and Wesley are going to give us that presentation.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Greenstein. We're here, kind of, as you may recall, back in February, the council, sorry, I have a feedback or echo, so. Back in February, the city council approved a program to fund a training series with the EDC to specifically provide business startup training to and targeted for minority businesses. And with that approval, we did say that once the first cohort, which was going to be taken off about 2 weeks after that approval, that we'd come back and do a formal report out to a council committee on that first cohort and next steps as well. So Wesley's here to kind of give an overview of the training program that was held back in April and who participated in some of the demographics, and then kind of talk about the second cohort's getting ready to launch. And I almost forgot, we do have a kind of a briefing paper or staff report that we have provided here at the meeting. I did email it to both you, Councilor Greenstein, as well as Mayor Ryder just before the meeting. So if you look in your emails, you'll find it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wesley.
Good morning. Yes, just to update you guys on the first cohort. We did the first cohort from February 15 to March 15. And the organization that run the program is Thurston County Economic Development Council Center for Business Innovation. And so they selected 17 participants, and about 12 consistently showed up for the training. So based on the 12 participants, 11 were either will have a business in Lacey or do have a business in Lacey. One is a resident of Lacey. So that's one of the requirements is if they are either a resident or if they have a business in Lacey, they get a scholarship of $750 that we fund through that program. 11 were minority-owned businesses. And then they break down 2 of those minority-owned businesses were also veteran-owned. And there were 10 women-owned businesses out of the 12 participants. And 9 of those women were minority-owned as well. 5 of the participants were idea stage, as it is a startup training program. And then 4 were in their first years of operation, and 3 were in their more than 1 year old. So that's the some of the content. And then in terms of the type of business, they range from a beauty care salon, legal support. There's somebody that want to do online media support. There's even a private school, a bar and grill, construction business. There's a lady that want to start a general contractor business as well. So it runs the gamut of different types of business. The feedback has been positive. We did the training staff did a post-training survey. And so in the email that Rick sent, there's a couple of testimony I want to read out. And one is testimony number 2, the Seed of Lacey Business Startup Training taught by Sean Moore and supported from the business coaches gave me such a needed guidance to help me figure out what things to focus on for my business especially the importance of having a business plan, I was able to have all my questions answered and receive referrals for other resources that help grow my business. I have just started, but I am much more confident now than I was before about the future success of my business, thanks to this trainings. Thanks to the continued using the resource provided through the course to build my business. So that's one example of the testimony that was received from the survey. And then the other thing I wanted to share is that, I mentioned earlier about the different demographics and number. I just want to share a story about this one particular participant. Her name is Carolyn. She's a native Alaskan woman. She's been 30 years of experience in construction. Started construction general contracting company called AMB Contractor. And her mission is not only to be successful in her business, but also help other women get into the construction industry. She participated in the training, and with the support of the lead trainer, she applied for the Thurston Target Startup Business Grant. And we don't know if she's successful in getting the grant or not, because it won't be announced until May 1st, but she's a strong candidate for that grant. And she hoped that if she get that grant, it's gonna help her to launch her business. And she wouldn't have gotten this information or this type of resource, I think, if she didn't participate in the program and having the support of the instructor to help her apply for the program. So that's just a little briefing of the participants and the program itself. And then the other part of the survey, the respondent indicated they would definitely recommend the course to other people. And then they all rated the course 5 out of 5 in terms of what they think of the course. Now looking at Cohort 2, it started last week. Deputy Mayor opened up the course last week for the group. I believe there were 12 people who called in for the meeting. The EDC accepted 17 participants to the program. So it started last week. Today is also the second week of the training, so they'll do. And we have, with the training, just a little briefing on the training, we have guest lectures that would come in and speak certain specific topic. For example, today they're gonna be doing location. And so we have Sarah, our senior planner here at the city, will be their guest speaker to talk about the different zoning and the different types of potential location based on their type of business interests. So where they could then look at different rent opportunities if they want to do a brick and mortar. So so that's kind of the gist of the program so far.
One of the things too about having that guest speaker or this topic specific is it also, I think they have somebody come in from the financial institutions to talk about some of the financing stuff. And our premise behind that, especially with our planning staff being a part of that program and training, is it reduces some barriers potentially, because now they know a familiar face. And so it's not so maybe daunting to come into City Hall and try to find out who you're supposed to talk about zoning, signage, those type of business license type of things. And so that's the other piece of it, is to try to create familiarity with city staff as well as other people or businesses that are in the kind of the resources for new businesses, so they can kind of get familiar and start making that networking connections. So it's been pretty valuable, and of course, with the curriculum being designed by Sean Moore at the Center of Business Innovation, he's done a fantastic job of putting that curriculum together, coordinating the cohorts, as well as promoting the efforts through their efforts there at the EDC to try to reach out to those businesses that we're trying to, or people we're trying to reach out to. So been very good so far. So we're starting a second cohort. When we brought this to the council as a proposal and an approval, we're talking about 2 cohorts. But as we've seen the number of folk coming in, the scholarships we were awarded, we're probably going to have some additional money that we can add a third and possibly a 4th cohort this year. So we'll continue that effort. And what we'll probably do is, after the second cohort's done, we'll sit down with the Center of Business Innovation, Sean and his team, and kind of map that out, and probably we'll suggest that we would have the third cohort occur in fall, and kind of take the summer off to kind of revamp, coordinate, and then in fall make that another push to see if we can get more people interest and build that into future years.
Excellent. Would you need any action from council to do a third cohort, or you can do that? You don't need any additional action from us, right?
I think we have the budget allocation. We're going to work in the current budget allocation for the program and the contract with EDC with the fund, and we'll just be able to add as that funding is available. The other piece of it too is we may be able to get more bang by this being a kind of a pilot program and a model that you'll probably see other jurisdictions in the county also try to provide scholarships for the businesses through this effort as well. So that's another way we can also get more information out or more awareness of this program that's being started this year.
Any questions? Andy, go ahead.
So how did you find the businesses to apply for these scholarships?
Both myself and EDC did a pretty robust marketing campaign to push out to our different network within our small business service provider community, like Equity for Enterprise and the South Sound Bipod Business Roundtable. So those sort of network kind of disseminate the information to a lot of folks. And I think it's the program itself is pretty robust in providing a lot of good resource for people. For example, the second cohort, we got 23 applicants, and of the 23, 15 were minority-owned businesses. And we were able to only select 17 of them. So we have enough applicants for sure. As you know, Mayor, a lot of people are quitting their jobs and looking at different ways to have a enjoyable livelihood. And one of the ways is open up their own business. So I think this is sort of the trends, a lot of what we see during the pandemic and the recovery of the pandemic is people are reassessing what they want to do with their career, and entrepreneurship is one of those. And I think we're in a good space to be able to support them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, even for someone who's been in business for as long as I have, over 20 years, the information they give is really good information. Like, it's not necessarily readily available for a lot of business owners. All the details that you need to do and think about, usually someone who starts a business, they have a good idea or they're really good at doing something, and so they try to turn that into a business. But then there's so many other aspects that you have to do to actually be successful. That it's programs like this are very much needed, and I really appreciate what you're doing for the BIPOC business owners in particular, who I'm sure really appreciate having this information.
Mayor, what you just said is really, really important to think about. One of the biggest reasons for failure in small businesses and new small businesses is people open businesses because they are really good at restaurants are a great example. Restaurants are typically opened by someone who loves to cook, a chef, but they have no experience in running a business. They know how to run the kitchen, they know how to cook, but they don't know how to run a restaurant, and it's two completely different skill sets. So I think most people starting a new business need this kind of help. So it's awesome that, we're able to help provide that. So I think that's phenomenal. Any other questions?
Yeah, I like the fact that you have startups and people that are contemplating what to do, that have an opportunity to learn something and potentially avoid shortfalls when they're engaging in their own success. So I appreciate that. In fact, I would even probably benefit from sitting through some of these meetings. But I appreciate this effort, and I like the fact that Lacey is leading the way on being an incubator for small businesses here in Lacey. And if we can lead the way, we're going to do it. So that's great.
Excellent. One quick question for you, Wesley. How many weeks is each cohort? How many?
5.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right.
This-
Any
this-
other questions?
This is that introductory piece too, because, remember, the EDC it has a lot of different other programs and trainings that kind of can build off of this initial entry level. So, as they start their business, they can also go into this, potentially scale up and, some of the economic gardening type programs and that are tailored to that next step or next level. But this is that pathway in to the whole complement of programs that the EDC has there, that the city contracts with the EDC as well to help support financially.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was awesome. Seeing nothing else, and we've reached the end of our agenda, I will, without objection, call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Scott, do you want to go in right now, or do you need a few minutes?
It's fun.